Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try to say something about a quote that comes from the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. So, what he said is this. He said, God is dead. Okay, so what's that all about? Well, where should I start? Well, why don't we first look at where and in what context Nietzsche says this? Okay, so the phrase God is dead appears in two of Nietzsche's works. It appears in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and then in The Gay Science. Now, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, what happens is basically this. What happens is that Zarathustra, the central character, comes across an old hermit saint in the forest who tells him that he spends all of his time making hymns and singing them to God. Then Zarathustra, after having left the old man, says to himself, he says, "Can it be that this old saint in the forest has not yet heard that God is dead?" In the other work, The Gay Science, Nietzsche has a so-called madman walk into a crowd of people and warn them that God is dead. Now, here's the thing. The madman's revelation isn't met with surprise or anger as one might expect. No, instead, the crowd appears to laugh at the madman for what they perceive as his lack of sophistication and intelligence. Of course God is dead, they assume. Everybody already knows that. But Nietzsche's message here is that it's actually the crowd that doesn't get it. What they fail to grasp is just how many of their values, how much of their behavior and their self-understanding and their lives in general are inextricably interwoven with the notion of God. And further, they don't understand, therefore, that all of this must end or die with Him, with God. Sure, they might have seen the flash of lightning. That's to say, intellectually, they might believe that God is dead. But it's only the madman who can hear the impending thunder and foresee the long-term effects of that big storm to come. The light of the stars requires time, says Nietzsche later in that passage. In other words, what the crowd is not at all conscious of is the monumental repercussions of the death of God. Okay, now, in general, it's pretty clear what Nietzsche means by the death of God. What he means is that our reliance on religion as a moral compass and a source of meaning is no longer tenable. The death of God is the recognition of a world that has no purpose, a world where there are no transcendent values to guide us and to give us any meaning. Now, this is what the madman implies when he says to the crowd later on that the death of God has wiped away our entire horizon, that it has unchained the earth from its sun, and that we are plunging in all directions. Actually, the idea of the death of God for Nietzsche is not simply the theistic God. No, in fact, it represents all metaphysical beliefs, like, for instance, Plato's dualist worldview. Any and all such beliefs that try to give order and meaning and permanence to the world. A world that Nietzsche thinks simply doesn't have these sorts of things. Now, just now I quoted Nietzsche when I said that the death of God has unchained the earth from the sun. Now, this has an obvious earlier precedent. So let me deviate here a little bit. Let me say something about Copernicus and the Copernican revolution, a fundamental intellectual turning point of Western civilization. Okay, so what was the consequence of the Copernican revolution? Well, basically, it was that this planet of ours wasn't God's creation, but rather it was a tiny satellite of a minor sun, and all of it in some very remote corner of the universe. Now, this doesn't sound very shocking to us now, of course, But imagine what Copernicus's discovery meant to the medieval world. I mean, for them, Earth and God were as near as could be. As Carl Jung once said, he said, "How totally different did the world appear to medieval man. For him, the earth was eternally fixed and at rest in the center of the universe. Men were all children of God under his loving care, who prepared them for eternal blessedness." Okay, well, Copernicus's new astronomy wiped all this away. It was a ruthless blow to faith. It was an atheistic blasphemy. Now, it is important to keep in mind that Copernicus didn't intend to demolish like this. I mean, after all, he was a Catholic and a church cleric. No, he didn't intend to harm anybody. He wasn't thinking about what his discovery would have on the future of belief or anything like that. He was just searching for knowledge, for truth. In fact, he was searching for the divine truth. That's to say, he was driven by the divine glory of the cosmos. He honestly believed that his discovery was ultimately a testament to the glory of God, to God's beautiful design. But all that said, the bottom line is that what he did is he transformed a geocentric and an anthropocentric cosmos. That is, a cosmos that revolved entirely around human beings. He transformed that into a chaotic manifold of planets and suns in which the Earth seemed like nothing more than a moment's palpitation of a drifting nebula. And so now God, who was once so near to people, who seemed to envelop them, now he dissipated into the far reaches of space, vanished from all creativity. And there we were left, completely unsheltered and vulnerable in the darkness of infinity. Actually, the philosopher Blaise Pascal, 200 years so later, gave incredible expression to just this sort of feeling left in the wake of the Copernican revolution. And by the way, Nietzsche read and admired Pascal, even though they ultimately held opposite views about belief and about God. Anyway, what Pascal said, famously of course, is this: "The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me." In other words, given this collapse of the view that the earth and that we human beings occupied central stage in the universal drama, Pascal felt forsaken and cast away in the universe. He felt homeless and swallowed up by the infinite. He felt like a stranger in a strange land. Now this was no longer a kindred cosmos. I don't know, maybe another way of putting this is that what Pascal felt intensely was the unimportance and the contingency and the absurdity of existence. As he himself said, "I'm frightened and shocked at being here rather than there, for there is no reason why here rather than there." Everything, in other words, now appears as a sheer and brute accident to him. Actually, you could see in this vision of things a kind of cosmic nihilism out of which some of the characteristic traits of existentialism would later evolve, Nietzsche included here. Now, actually, it turns out that Pascal still retained his faith in God, but make no mistake about it, this is now pretty much an unknown God, a God who's no longer discernible in the pattern of his own creation. Anyway, I guess my point here is that the Copernican revolution cast an enormous shadow over our psyches. To be displaced from the center of things, to be humbled in self-importance, that's not easy. And it's not fun. It has its existential implications. Actually, this reminds me of what Freud said about Copernicus's influence. He said that humanity has had to endure from the hands of science two great outrages upon its naive self-love. The first was when it realized that our Earth was not at the center of the universe. And the second great outrage was, well, you guessed it, it was Darwin and his theory of evolution. Anyway, so back to Nietzsche. So dealing with the consequences of this collapse or loss of the death of God was, I think, Nietzsche's most important aim in life. That's to say, for him, nihilism, the idea that there is no ultimate meaning and that there are no ultimate values, this was the problem to be overcome. That's what he cared most about. But suffice it to say, overcoming this isn't easy. And that's because Nietzsche recognizes that all sorts of false idols will still camouflage God's death, and that these too must be shattered, along with anything else that conceals nihilism from itself. You see, what Nietzsche discerned is that when God dies and a secular age gets established, our traditional religious beliefs and the needs that have been so deeply formed by those beliefs will, whether we're aware of it or not, still tend to seek fulfillment and reaffirmation. So in a secular age like ours, this will find its expression through other sorts of agencies, like political movements or ideologies, to say nothing of scientific and technological ones. Really, for Nietzsche, political or any other ideologies are, in a sense, substitute religions. That is, they are the manifestation of a need for a set of authoritative, objective beliefs and normative practices. And so they have a certain salvational function to them, filling the big God-shaped hole. Well, you might be wondering, what's Nietzsche's response to this then, to this problem of the death of God? Well, very generally, for him, the right response to nihilism is basically twofold. It's this. First of all, it's to get out from under such shadows of God and to see, really see, the world as it is, unveiled, entirely free from metaphysical systems of truth and morality. And then, second of all, after having honestly and courageously accepted the way things actually are, part of the proper response to nihilism is to go on to affirm life as it is, to be a great yes-sayer to it. It's to go on to live and to act and create in a world without God, without truth, and without certainty. Maybe another way of putting this is that the right response to the death of God is coming to terms with the world as it actually is, and then loving it so much that you don't need to look for any kind of salvation outside of it. Actually, sometimes Nietzsche calls this sort of positive response or attitude active nihilism. And what he does is he opposes it to something he calls passive nihilism. So essentially, passive nihilism, he says, is something like the withdrawal or resignation from the world when faced with the uncertainty of inherent meaning. And active nihilism, well, that's the opposite orientation completely. That's to accept that there is no inherent meaning in the universe, but yet to go on to affirm life and to recreate values for yourself. It's to confirm and celebrate the absolute unconditional embrace of existence. Bye for now.